So news recently broke of the divorce between Salama and Khalid. And if you don't know who Salama and Khalid are, I'm going to pop a picture of them up on the screen. I'm sure you'll recognize them. They are two Muslim content creators from the UAE. Their Instagram social media game was popping off in the past few years. I remember that my For You page on my Instagram would constantly be flooded with videos of them. The Muslim world fell in love with them because they were a quirky, silly couple who were posting content that made people smile and laugh about just everyday situations in family life and marriage. They were regularly seen as couples goals, and it's actually really interesting to see how thrown off the general Muslim community is about their divorce. I'm going to throw up some comments on the screen. You guys can see, obviously, people have very strong feelings about what is going on, but I wanted to talk about it. But before that, Assalamu alaikum. If you are new here, my name is Hannah. I am a PA who practices medicine. I'm a trauma coach, and this is my YouTube channel. It is all about self-improvement, my self-improvement journey, and helping you on your self-improvement journey. So if you are a Muslim who is interested in that, then please hit subscribe. If you're watching this, please watch to the end, because I'm going to be dropping, inshallah, some very powerful insights for you, so you can make sure that you are able to walk away from learning this information in a way that actually betters your current marriage if you are married, or if you are not married, helps to better your future marriage, inshallah. I love talking about this topic because I think it's such a neglected topic in our community, and we need really structured, practical ways about going at this, because unfortunately the ways that we are talking about marriage in our community isn't cutting it. Now, I'm not one for reaction videos. I have no intention about sitting here and speculating what might have happened. I think there's no reason to. I don't think that's appropriate for a Muslim to be doing, and it honestly saddens me when I see Muslim influencers trying to jump on the clout of a big event that has happened to any content creator, especially with something as vulnerable and private as a divorce. But I did want to comment on the community's reaction to this and what are things that we can learn from this. Now, here's the thing. Salama and Khalid, I have an urge to accidentally call her Salma, so I do in this video. You know what I meant. Salama and Khalid built their entire online presence based on an illusion. And when I say that, I mean that their content was specifically curated. You guys, their content were skits. They were meant to be joking. They were meant to be funny. They were not meant to reflect the actual happenings of what was going on in their marriage. And because they were letting us into this curated version of their life, people felt like they were being let into a very intimate part of their life. And when you feel like you're super close to a content creator because of the type of content they put out, and then something like this happens, it makes sense that a huge portion of their viewership is going to want to know what happened. They're going to have very strong emotional reactions to what the news is. But it begs a question of, how did we as a community allow ourselves to get so disillusioned where we fell for curated, scripted content that was supposed to create a scene? It was supposed to be something that wasn't real to invoke a reaction. How did we get so caught up in that we didn't realize that people can have lives outside of what they put out online? You've heard this time and time again ever since social media became super popular, especially with the advent of Instagram specifically, way before TikTok ever was a thing, is that social media is the highlight reel of a person's life. And actually, even beyond that, I would say it's not always a highlight reel, because highlights are at least still honest portrayals of what's going on in your life. Sometimes it's actually a crafted illusion of what people want you to think is going on, but not what is actually going on. And when we allow ourselves to get so emotionally invested in these situations, we stop ourselves from doing the critical mental work that needs to happen so that these things don't affect us to the level that we don't want them to. Now, here's the thing. One, being married, and two, having seen friends through the ups and downs of their marriages. One thing is very clear to me, which is the way a couple portrays their marriage on the outside is not always a reflection of what is happening. There are always going to be challenges. They're not going to put out the fights and the arguments and the gridlocks that they have. They're not going to put online the times that they were really upset or angry or emotional. You're not going to see that. And for good reason. You shouldn't put that stuff out online. That should be kept private between a couple. Because as a community, we're so obsessed with marriage. And listen, partly a good thing. As Muslims, we very much should be interested in marriage because it is half our deen, and the Prophet ﷺ emphasized it very highly. It is the backbone of a society because it builds a family. It is a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to connect with one another. But it's almost like we get blind by our obsession with marriage that we forget that there also exists a reality behind marriage that we need to prepare for. And as a self-improvement page and someone who just really wants people to know these things, I like speaking very candidly and maybe pulling back the curtain so that we can prepare ourselves to have a healthy marriage. And I actually already have a few videos on marriage, what I think everyone should know before they prepare for marriage. If you go to the main page of my channel, it should be right on there. But also I'll try to inshallah link the playlist at the end of this video. With that being said, what are some lessons that we can learn from this? Number one is, first and foremost, for those who are married, be mindful of what you put out online. Now, I'm not just talking about from an ayn perspective, and I feel like there are a lot of people who are speculating that this might be ayn. I don't think it was ayn. I think they just generally had issues behind closed doors, and it just finally surfaced, and we are just not finding out about it. But be mindful about what you put out online. I think there is a huge temptation because there are so many Muslim couple content creators. And let's be honest, one, they get a lot of attention, but also with that comes a lot of money. A lot of them are working with brands and putting out content that gets monetized on YouTube. And so it's easy to see that and not see the dangers or the risks that are associated with putting your private life online. Now, if you're going to do that, just do it mindfully, do it responsibly, and really sit down and think about what the reason is that you're doing it and what it brings to your content. Now, I say this as someone who occasionally you'll see my husband pop up in a vlog or a video, but that's not what my entire channel is about. So just be careful and mindful about what you put out there. Number two, it comes from the fact that I was seeing comments where people were like, oh, I wish they would sit down and work this out. And it made me realize that a lot of people are not familiar with the reality of divorce. And obviously divorce, we've been saying this for years, divorce is a huge taboo in our community. And when something is a taboo, what ends up happening is that you don't actually know what goes into coming to the point of divorce. People tend to have their divorce behind closed doors. They want to maintain their privacy. They don't want to be talked about by other people in the community. Completely understandable. But because we've cast such a big shadow on the topic of divorce, it leaves a lot of us and many people who might end up in that situation blind to what the reality is of the journey through that. And so you might not realize that they more than likely already attempted reconciliation. These issues probably went on for years and became deeply rooted. They more than likely already saw professionals and counselors and went through the arbitration period. When you think about it, especially if you're someone who has a public profile of your marriage, you're not going to come to a point of ending that lightly. Think about that and give grace to people who are going through a divorce. Divorce is halal for a reason. And yes, the number of divorces are going up in general, but oftentimes we don't realize that when we're looking at that statistic, we're actually looking at the statistic of, at least in the United States, of the United States at large, which doesn't reflect the Muslim population in the United States or the Western world, which is much, much lower in rates of divorce. Another thing I want to point out is so often when we see these Muslim couple influencers, whether we realize it or not, it is affecting our assessment of potential partners. And for those of you guys who aren't married, pay attention to this part. When we see things that seem exciting and lovely on these videos, we don't realize that sometimes we start to weigh these things as much heavier than they actually should be weighed. And so we get lost in the glitz and the glam of the videos that they're putting out. And we start thinking we want someone who can provide us this lifestyle. And very often these couples are showing their vacations and the fun things they do and the places they go. And we neglect the other things that we should be looking at when it comes to marriage, like deen and khuluq. Honestly, couples who really prioritize deen and khuluq are not usually going to be couples that are putting their entire life online and showing everything that they do. Another thing that comes to mind is this kind of content can shift our value system and what we look for in a partner. It's really important to be doing the preparation, the work before getting married. It's something we neglect so much. It's something I talk about very practically on my channel because I want you guys to walk away with actual ways to prepare for marriage. And I'm actually working on a few digital products around this that I think are going to be incredibly helpful, inshallah, to our community here on YouTube, people who actually genuinely care about their self-improvement, care about bettering themselves, and care about finding someone who will complement their life and bring them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Preparing for marriage is way more than just letting people know you're interested, making sure you look good. It is working on your character. It is working on your religiosity. It is getting your money right especially if you're a man. It is making sure that you are working on these skill sets that you need to be a good husband or a good wife. And there are a lot of questions about where would we understand that. And I've been getting a lot of requests from you. I think this is the most requested video of a video specifically to Muslim women of how to prepare to be a good Muslim wife. And I promise you guys, inshallah, that video is coming sometime after Ramadan, whether it's a month after Ramadan or so, but it's coming. In the meantime, keep doing the work that you need to do. Now let's remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about marriage. How do we bolster or protect our marriage? Think about it like this. If you have a beautiful castle, you'll never see a castle usually just on its own. There's usually a fort protecting it of some sort. You want to build up some barriers to build up the resilience of your marriage. And one way to do that is to really think about what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about marriage. And in the Quran, there are 3 main words that we can attribute to marriage. The first one is mawadda, the second is rahmah, and the third is sakina. And I will get into those details very shortly, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that he places mawadda and rahmah between the husband and the wife. And mawadda is a compassionate love. It is inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, al-wadud, which is the loving. And the rahmah is mercy. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the purpose of marriage is litaskunu ilayha, that you may find tranquility, sakina, in one another. And so sakina is a type of peace that honestly is very hard to achieve in other parts of our life, but it is one that can be achieved so beautifully in marriage. And so with that being said, if we now look at it as a framework where you have mawadda, rahmah, and sakina, look at these 3 qualities and you start thinking, what is it that I can do for my husband or for my wife, for my future spouse, to increase the mawadda between us, the compassionate love? What can I do to make sure that my husband or wife feels more loved, and really honing in on that? Also understanding what is love. Love is not just a feeling. It's not just butterflies in your stomach. It is an experience. It is an action. Now it's moving on to rahmah. Rahmah is mercy. Mercy is the type of quality that we have that we're required to use to overlook the faults of people, to overlook shortcomings. And the reality of it, nobody is perfect. And so the person you marry is not going to be perfect either. And so think about, how can I embrace and enact mercy in my relationship? What are the kinds of things that I'm willing to overlook? Also, what are the things that I'm not going to overlook? How can I be transparent about that from the very beginning, so we have similar understandings of what our expectations are of one another? And lastly is sakina. Sakina, peace. When you think about marriages that are completely destructive, marriages that ended in divorce, I can guarantee you one thing and one thing only, which is that marriage had to have lost sakina to get to that point of divorce. If you want to divorce-proof your marriage, then you need to work on building sakina, peace, tranquility. You think about, what are the things that are going to maintain peace in my marriage? What are the things that I'm just not going to start a fight about, because it's not worth it, and fights disrupt peace if they are not productive. I'm not saying that you should never argue or disagree. That's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, conflict resolution is a very important and inherent part of marriage, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. But it's how you go about those disagreements that makes all the difference, and how you go about the repairs after it. So what are things that I'm just going to let go and not make a big deal out of? And then when things do come up that are threats to peace, how do we make sure that we are repairing those and moving forward in a productive way that actually helps our marriage, helps build the life that we want to build together? And that brings me to the final point, which is vision. Talk about vision. Very often when you think about marriage, the only vision people have is the vision of what their wedding is going to look like. There's no vision about what your marriage is going to look like. And the thing about vision is, it is part of being intentional. And our deen is so big about being intentional. And I know for some people, they hear this and it sounds so mechanical, but intentionality and effort go hand in hand. And when you are intentional about something and you put effort about it, you are stacking the odds in your favor to be very successful. Talk to anyone who has reached any level of success in their life. It didn't come about accidentally. It came through a series of very intentional actions, learning, growing, and putting that into whatever it is that they're working on. The same applies to your marriage. Do not neglect that. Think about what your vision is for your marriage. And when you're getting to know someone for marriage, and if you are in your marriage, build out that vision together so you know what you're working towards. And so even though we see that Salama and Khalid are no longer together, don't think that love is dead like some people have been commenting. You should never put that much weight in anyone's relationship. The only relationship that you should be that emotionally attached to is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And your marriage should be a reflection, inshallah, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love for you, and so you work towards that. But don't let yourself be discouraged or fear. Sometimes there's fear that comes around this. When we built up this idea of the kind of couple that they were based on the content that we were consuming from them, and then we see that that wasn't the reality, it can cause a lot of fear and anxiety for so many people about getting married. Do not let that fear consume you. Again, remember, intentionality, effort, a lot of dua. If you have not seen the Ramadan dua series, if you scroll through, there's a specific dua from the Quran that we should be making for our marriage. I will also link that dua in the description below for you guys to memorize and continue to make through, and not just during this time, but throughout your lives and even while you are married. I hope that this video was helpful to you guys, and if you did enjoy it, then please do not get to this point without liking the video and commenting below. This is how YouTube spreads this content further to help more Muslims just like yourself. And if you're not subscribed yet, you haven't hit subscribe, then please hit subscribe, because I love creating content about self-improvement, whether it is improving your mental health, your spirituality, or your marriage. And I would love for you guys to be a part of it. Assalamu alaikum.